topic of bridging the skills gap in the workplace is something that we think about deeply. And there's three ways that we want to look at this today. So the first is in a practical sense. We want to understand what are the roles, but also the hard skills that people will need as they approach trying to find work that is climate positive work or climate tech work, which is a topic that we're going to get deeper into with Tim today. So moving from Tim and the practical side, then we're getting into the behavioural side of this with Nancy Claxton, who is an educator and public health specialist, but also somebody with a really, really deep understanding of how behaviours work in team environments. And Nancy will be doing an interactive workshop with some of our guests here today. So that's something we're really looking forward to on this call, to bring that behavioural aspect to this. And then finally, we're looking at what we could say is the emotional or the psychological aspect of something I just mentioned earlier, which is thinking about climate can often be overwhelming. And the esteemed Irish author and comedian Colm O'Regan is very familiar with this topic in his book, Climate Warrior, which is a bestseller. It's about the tools and the mental ways that we can deal with the existential worry that can often be thinking about climate change. So call it sit-down comedy or stand-up comedy, or a mixture of serious but also humorous perspectives on how to think about this type of subject matter. So we have a really action-packed lineup, and without further ado, I think it's time that we get into it and start by bringing Tim Steppich to the floor. How are you, Tim?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Tim, you may be on mute.
Can you hear me?
No, everyone hears it. Okay, maybe it's just me. 1 second. Oh, I hear you now. Sorry.
Ah, nice. Sweet.
Hello?
Hello, hello.
I got you. Okay.
Nice.
Now, oh, for God's sake. Sorry, Tim, 1 second. Now,
Okay.
I'm just a beacon of hope for all the people who struggle with tech out there. But yeah,
No,
Tim,
I know the feeling. Even after 2 years of pandemic, just headphones do whatever they want. It's impossible to prepare.
Yeah, exactly. With all this training, and still I find myself struggling to get into a Zoom conference or a webinar. So look, Tim, the description that I wanted to give of you was one that is brief, but also gives people a flavor of the expertise that you're going to be bringing to this conversation. So starting off, everybody, Tim is a Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneur. In a previous life, he was an investor, and he's had a progression in his career from being interested and curious about climate solutions and climate tech to eventually making the jump to founding a business called ClimateEU. And their mission is to connect climate tech workers, climate tech builders, and ultimately people within the entire European ecosystem that are trying to make a positive contribution on climate change solutions. So yeah, Tim, I thought I'd open it up to you first. And yeah, if you want to give an introduction to yourself and a bit of what you do. And then from there, we'll get into the Q&A and start asking some questions.
Yeah, cool. No, sounds good. Thanks for the mini intro already. So just in a nutshell, like many people around me, I came out of business school. So I kind of knew how to do everything and nothing, and got really excited about somehow now getting a job that I thought would like have an impact, and didn't really know what that meant. So I did, I think, 6-7 internships across the board in startups, investing all across the place. And I kept on coming across this term climate tech, and I was like, okay, well, what the hell is this about? And joined an investor, was responsible for climate tech, and got really nerdy about it. I was like, this is super exciting. There's actually a bunch of companies, like thousands of companies in Europe, that do some really cool things to help us advance a bit towards fighting climate change. And I felt like there was no resource in Europe that could just tell me like, hey, what are the places I can apply at? What are the places in Ireland? What are places in Germany? What are places in France where I can work at, given my particular skills? And so starting as a little project initiative, open source database, I just started a place for people to find employers, to find startups, to find corporates, to find consultancies and so on. And that then turned into my full-time job eventually. It escalated quickly. And now actually a platform is free for anyone who wants to look for a job. We give everyone free job recommendations across Europe. And we just charge companies for some premium features. But basically our job is to connect anyone who wants to work at a climate tech startup. And I think Jack will get into what exactly that means with people that are looking to move into this space.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, that's really concise, and you've also managed to weave in your story of how you've got to this point. I think to start off, and always tying things back into what we're trying to achieve today, which is creating wider understanding of the skills required in the workplace to address climate change issues, whether that's hiring new people or whether that's people who are in the room today trying to come away from this conversation and know, okay, maybe there's an idea that I can take to the workplace where I'm not reinventing the wheel with my own job or my own team or my own company, but that I understand maybe a bit more about what's required. So let's start at the very basic beginning and say, what is climate tech? Can you describe what that is to me and people in the audience?
Yeah, so probably a lot of you have heard about maybe green tech or clean tech, and there's a few different takes on what climate tech is. It's the one take would just be it's kind of the new buzzwordy term for anything that covers sustainability. For some people, it's all companies who at the core of the business model tackle climate change. So it's not we're selling pullovers and we're planting a tree, because selling pullovers is not going to reduce carbon in any way. But it is, okay, actually when the business model is about planting trees, or the business model is about removing carbon. And then our take is not just about reducing carbon, but really any company that at the core of the business model actually actively does something good for the environment. So it doesn't necessarily need to be directly moving carbon. It can be improving biodiversity. It can be cleaning up ocean plastics, etc. So anything that's good for the environment for us is climate tech. There's even a bit of discussion about what it's about, but at the core, that's it. So really a mission-aligned company that the more successful the company is as the business model scales, the bigger the environmental impact it has.
Brilliant. So if we distill it down to its essence, which is companies that are essentially working on making a positive impact on climate change, i.e. reducing carbon emissions either directly or indirectly, or creating solutions that can influence that in some way. How would you say that then maybe trickles down to the lower level, which is what are the types of jobs that we're seeing, but also what are the types of skill sets that you think are most applicable, whether in repurposing yourself in your own workplace or just contributing in some way? Yeah, if you could give some idea, maybe some of the data from ClimateEU and just stuff that you're seeing yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a common misconception is that you need to have a background in sustainability or you need to be a scientist to work in climate. And actually, these are just ordinary businesses who hire on the commercial side, who hire on the tech side, who hire scientists, who hire like for life cycle assessments, so very sustainability focused jobs, for consultants, for strategists, and so on, CFOs, tax advisors, legal advisors. So we have roughly right now 10,000 jobs a month posted, and they cover everything you can imagine. So our goal is that people sign up, they put down what their background is, they put down what their experience level is, and that they instantly see jobs that actually match their background. So it's not a sustainability job, it's just any job at a company that does something good. So that it's not about you changing your background and your skills and re-educating yourself. It's more about using the skills that you already have and the things that you're really good at, and then leveraging them by working at a company that does something good.
Fantastic. Yeah. And if you were to single out 2 or 3 skills that you think maybe aren't the most obvious things that could be a direct contributor for an individual who's trying to get involved in the climate conversation at work, because we know that there's this concept of communication around sustainability and climate change in the workplace, and how often it's the quality and the level to which that's successful that leads to ultimately harder and deeper problems being solved, whether it's, you know, changing the packaging in the company, changing the way the business fundamentally works, or even just creating an employee-run group. I mean, that's something that a lot of people are aware of and part of, where, you know, it's literally the start of a conversation. But yeah, back to the question, which was, yeah, what do you see as advantageous or positive skills that can help contribute?
Yeah, I think just a curiosity and an engagement with the whole topic is just really crucial, because you have, right now we see around like 4,000, maybe 5,000 companies in Europe that we would classify as climate tech. There's probably a bit more because you're not seeing everyone. And obviously they get a lot of attention. They have a lot of people wanting to work for them. And just like any other company, when they post a job on LinkedIn, these companies post a job on LinkedIn and they usually go a bit viral because it's a trendy topic. And so it's great to actually understand the impact the company has. It's great to actually understand the industry and to be passionate about it. And maybe, I don't know, just try to make a change in the job you're already right now, even if it's not related to that specific topic, and just show that motivation or build a bit of knowledge around the topic. Also just for yourself to understand, hey, where's the place where I can make the best contribution given my personal skill set. I think then if you show up on interview, or if you get in contact, doesn't need to be you starting to work as a climate tech at a climate tech startup. Can also just be you wanting to challenge a bit what you're currently doing at your current company. I think it's just good to read newsletters, read articles, listen to podcasts, and inform yourself about what's happening in that space. And you can take it from there. And I think you'll find whatever works best for you.
Brilliant. And to tail off that, what resources or newsletters or anything of that nature, if you were to recommend to people in the audience today and say, I think you should look at this if you are interested, because by nature of being in this conversation, we have people that are interested. So yeah, could you give us some ideas of the sort of things that you enjoy engaging with?
Yeah, definitely. So for example, there is a podcast called My Climate Journey, and it basically every episode covers a founder that has built or is building a climate tech company, and it really takes you through their thought process, their potential impact, where they're coming from. And so you can really see, can I identify with this business or not? There is Climate Tech VC, which is a newsletter, which is I think read by now by 50,000 people, and they really shed the light on different industries, and it's a great starting point to just get an idea. Sometimes can be a bit, maybe if it's the first article you read, it might be a bit much, so you might have to do some follow-up reading on some topics, but it's a great starting point. We have a newsletter as well, so obviously I'm recommending that. Yeah, I think just it's almost too many resources. There is a Google sheet, it's called So You Want to Start Working in Climate Change or in Climate Tech. And it has hundreds of online communities, podcasts, newsletters. So maybe also afterwards I can share a link. So it's a great starting point to just get an idea of all the resources out there. But there's almost too many resources already. They should consolidate a bit, but there's really great resources out there.
Yeah, I think that's what it's about, isn't it? Finding a way to speed up the time between where you ultimately are now, which could be, I'm interested, maybe I've already become slightly overwhelmed by this idea of climate tech, but that we can fast track or reduce barrier to entry for people who want to actually start learning more about these topics. And yeah, just for everybody that's here today, anything that Tim references, like he said there, we're going to collate everything into a follow-up. So you'll have podcasts, newsletters, whatever it is. So yeah, that's fantastic. So I was going to take a kind of segue into something I guess you could say is slightly less focused on, say, climate jobs and climate specifically, climate tech in your context specifically, but the outward context. As somebody who's seeing a lot of different solutions or companies in the climate tech area, what are a couple of the most exciting companies that you've seen in terms of how they're tackling the challenge of reducing global carbon emissions, or maybe it's separate, they're doing something that influences that. But yeah, give us an idea of some of the more charismatic and exciting solutions out there.
Yeah, definitely. Also, maybe just a quick sentence beforehand that's probably also interesting is that climate tech is really broad, right? It's the energy sector, it's the transport sector, it's carbon removal, it's climate finance. It's just really, really broad. So whenever I get that question, it's really hard to answer it because there's so many different industries. And in the end, it's kind of a movement of the entire economy trying to shift to net zero, right? So any company that's trying to accelerate that shift falls within climate tech. It's quite broad. And I'm just very excited about all the very nerdy hard tech solutions that you can actually grab. So not necessarily the little app where you can offset your carbon footprint, but for example, there's one company, just think about them because they announced their first prototype today. They call Brilliant Planet. And they have this crazy idea, which hopefully is going to work out, where they redirect ocean water in Morocco into the desert. They put algae into the water. The algae takes the CO2 out of the water, and the water gets rerouted into the ocean. And that way, the ocean can absorb more carbon, and then they can sell carbon certificates. So it's like a crazy business model. No one knows if it's going to scale or be successful, but obviously it's very exciting if it does. And then there's the very simple things where a company called in German 1,5, 1,5, that just helps consumers easily install solar panels on the roof, like easily understand if it makes sense, first of all, financially, what is the process, how can we go about it, what are different providers, and they do it all for you. They explain the financing, they give you consulting. And so I think it's just something that's super straightforward in a lot of countries to get solar, but it's just so complicated and it's so overwhelming. So that's just a company that's super scalable, because if it works and then suddenly everyone can use this platform to get solar on the roof, that's also exciting. So those are, for example, two companies, but really there's some really crazy topics out there, using existing infrastructure of water coolers on the roof where they mix a chemical in, and then the water cooler can bind CO2 and they can extract the CO2 out of existing air conditioning infrastructure. So there's really crazy stuff happening. And there's also more straightforward software on a climate finance side. There's a lot, it's a bit Pandora's box if you open it, but there's a lot of exciting stuff there.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to nerd out, I think, when you start to feed yourself kind of more of this learning around what climate tech is ultimately, but also the types of solutions. There's a really interesting one company in India. The name slips me now, but I'll share it afterwards, where they remove residual emissions in the air with this device that can then turn it into ink, which can be used to print onto t-shirts and clothing. So little things like that, which you hear about and you're just like, that's really neat, really cool. And the same with, yeah, a lot of these companies where it's actually just nice to hear about them and you don't have to understand them, but just to, I guess, get a better understanding that there's some really interesting stuff happening in the world. So yeah, in terms of, we're coming close to the end of the Q&A with me and you, but I would like to open up the floor with people. But first, I wanted to, I guess, jargon bust again, but yeah, in a way that can give people more access to what you do on ClimateEU. And yeah, I wanted to start by saying, obviously, there's a lot of, what could be considered forward language around climate and fighting climate change and war style language that we often hear, that when you're not in the space, it seems quite serious. But we wanted to end this by saying to you, obviously, your mission is to help people to start working to fight climate change for a living. And I just wanted to ask you, we may have some professional combat sports people in the room today. And just for them, would fighting climate change pay better than, selling out Madison Square
Garden? Probably yes. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. But I wouldn't even be surprised if some famous boxer would be invested in climate tech funds now or supporting climate tech startups, because you even see like Formula One drivers starting their own funds. Leonardo DiCaprio has a climate tech fund. Bill Gates does. And it's not just because they are super philanthropic and they're just throwing their money around. It's because it's a great business opportunity. And I think obviously also to maybe take a bit the seriousness out of it, I think often it comes across a bit as in either you work at a climate tech startup now and you fight climate change for a living, or you don't and you're a bad person. It's obviously not how it is. It's we can't all work at a startup. We can't, even though that ecosystem is going forward. I think there's a lot of different ways of getting involved, and it's also a lot about what can you do around your environment and what can you do at the current company you're at. And it's also, starting with the little things. I just think that someone who's very excited about working at a startup or a tech company and looking to the space anyway, it's a no-brainer to work at a company that does something good, that's mission aligned, and that you can identify with and come home and like be excited and tell your kids about and explain to them how you're changing the world. I think it's just very exciting. And I think it's starting a bit of a wave throughout the world where that then pushes corporates to also reconsider, hey, how can we make our business models more sustainable? Maybe we're not going to be a climate tech company, but how can we make things more circular? How can we even commute more sustainably? How can we use the office more sustainably? How can we engage with these climate tech startups and maybe use some of their solutions to become more sustainable ourselves? So I think from boxes to everyone in this call, there's some way of fighting climate change, and just everyone needs to find what's best for them.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks so much, Tim. And before we, I guess, round up your section, I just wanted to open the floor to everybody here. If anyone has a question for Tim, please put it into the chat. Just put in a thumbs up or just a message into the chat, or you indeed put in your question and I can share it with Tim now. And while you're doing that, Tim, if you could just share where people can find you, or if there's one thing that you wanted to share with the group today before you went.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, the first thing probably I would love if some of you guys just checked out the website and checked out if there's job recommendations that fit your background. That's always my primary incentive, that people just quickly sign up and then see if there's jobs matching what they're doing. And if there isn't, then let me know as well, because we're always trying to like make sure we find something for everyone. It's ClimateEU, which is a bit confusing. It's written climate and then just the letter U. I'm also going to put a link in the comments. Just check out the website, and then you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Anytime, LinkedIn always works best. Or just email it, but with the name it's a bit confusing. Again, it's tim@climateu.earth. Feel free to just reach out if you have any specific questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, Tim, we actually have a question in from Rob. So before we continue on, there's a really interesting question here that says, what are the advantages of ClimateEU over, say, using LinkedIn for job searches, or indeed looking for talent in the sustainability field? And what is the uptake in, say, Ireland, UK of ClimateEU? And I know you mentioned this is an introduction to Ireland for you through this webinar. So take it away. Yeah, definitely. So let's start with the easier one. So UK is very big on the website already. UK is probably the biggest ecosystem in Europe with Germany and Sweden. So that there's a lot of companies there hiring. So we have a bunch of stuff on UK. That's also why we're changing the name, because EU now doesn't really work for the UK anymore. But that's to be done. And then LinkedIn job search, we were just coming from my problem when I was using LinkedIn trying to work in climate tech, because there is no climate tech filter. Like that you can obviously look for green job or sustainable, and you will find some things and some companies. But for us, it's basically the only thing we're doing. The only thing we're doing is we're identifying companies that are climate tech day and night. And we're also a deal sourcing tool for investors. So we find companies that have maybe 3 employees and just started. So that's where we are kind of good at. So yeah, you just, first of all, it's for free, nothing to lose. And then I hope you come back from it seeing that the data is just much better than on LinkedIn. And on top of that, we combine it with their specific data. So if you want to work in the energy sector in solar, or you want to work in a startup between 1 and 50 employees,
or you want to work at a company that has gotten venture capital funding. Like we have all these filters, or even if you want to work at a company that has a female leader, we have the filter for it. So we just give all that data and all these resources for free, and you can just check them out. And then we hope to be much better than LinkedIn. Also, I think one thing we're not doing, we're not at all including any corporate jobs. So something like a job where you work at a corporate where your only job is to create a sustainability report for a company that's maybe not sustainable at all, and your job is to make the numbers look nice. Like you're never going to find that on the job board. So yeah, we think that we're a bit ahead of LinkedIn there. But it's a really good question. I get that question a lot. And Ireland is a bit of a blind spot still. I'm still waiting for someone to compile a really good list of Ireland. We have some companies on it. I can't tell you how many, but I already told Jack that afterwards we'll debrief and I'll make a list and I'll make sure we have all the jobs from Ireland as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's a great introduction to people who are definitely interested here today. So one more question in is from Taishi, and it's, do you have some job opportunities in the public sector as well?
We have some, still few. So right now it's very startup, for-profit focused, and we're trying to get more into government and non-profits. It's not the main focus yet because startups are just very good at finding them, but that's definitely gonna happen more in detail for sure.
Okay, great. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and yeah, hopefully through our conversation we could jargon bust a little bit, but also open up the door to show that, you know, it's not inaccessible to want to be able to engage with climate tech or removing the word just sustainability in the workplace in general. So we're really, really happy to have had this conversation, and all of those additional materials you mentioned I'll share after. But yeah, thanks so much, Tim. Really appreciate it.
And of course, thanks for having me, guys. If you have any questions, just shoot me a message anywhere, LinkedIn, email, or on ClimateEU with the chat board. They also land in my email inbox, so feel free to just write a message.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much.
Of course.
Hey, everybody. So we're at a point in the webinar now where we'll be moving on to our second speaker. And I'll give you an introduction to our second speaker. She is one of the most incredible people that I've met on my journey in trying to work in a company that's helping to change behaviors and helping to make a positive impact on climate change. And she's an infectious person as well. In terms of the session we're about to embark on, it's going to be interactive. So we will be asking if some people could put themselves forwards to engage with Nancy's session. But before we get to that point, I just want to give you a brief introduction to Nancy. So Nancy's an educator and public health expert and a behavior changer. So probably the most interesting title you can give somebody when it comes to this space. But Nancy's work is global and has spanned organizations like the American Red Cross. And then more on the actual work that she does, it spans consultancy where she's helping nations and community groups to effectively change their behavior for the better, whether that's through climate change or other health-related activities. And to be honest, I think I could spend a long time going through the list of things. I remember I asked Nancy last week if she could tell me 2 things that are so interesting that I could share with the crowd. And yeah, it was just too long of a list to actually pick 1 or 2. But Nancy is somebody who resides in Ireland, but is, we could say, a global person in that Irish heritage, came from the US, and is somebody that is going to engage you in a session today that is something different to what you'd usually get on these types of webinars. So yeah, Nancy, I'll open up the floor, and from there we can round up the key volunteers. We've already got a number, so from there then we can kick into the session. But yeah, I'll open the floor to you to introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you, Jack. What a lovely introduction. I appreciate that. As Jack said, I'm based in Ireland, and I have been working in education, public health, and behavior change, and I'm going to walk you through some fun stuff today. So anytime I present any kind of content, I basically want to make sure that people are engaged. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, so I have a small little company called Noddlepod, and it's myself. I have a graphic designer, a behavior change researcher from the University of Geneva, as well as a data analyst who's in the crowd. Hi, Melissa Quimby. And what we do is we basically understand what the people's needs are, what their capacities and their gaps are, and we figure out a way to develop content, training material, surveys, what have you, to be able to figure out what the determinants of behavior are, what the barriers are, and we come up with materials to basically address those issues. We've been working a lot with the UN, the WHO, specifically around health topics, as well as some other topics like violence and things like that. I came to Ireland because I was working in the Irish prison system, doing behavior change in all the prisons, and it's a beautiful program that basically uses behavior change through the actual inmates who are our volunteers who go cell to cell and do the programming. Very cool program. Okay, so I have recently been working with a group called Climate Fresque. So Climate Fresque, what it is it's a French concept. A fresque is basically a way to pull out a bunch of cards that are determinants or factors around a specific issue, and then in a group, basically trying to figure out the lineation of how these things occur. So the causes and the consequences around each of these factors so that people can understand what causes the problems. So when I talk to people and they say, yeah, I know a little bit about climate change, and they say things like recycling and planting trees and things like that, but they're not quite sure how it all fits together. It's a big puzzle that's constantly shifting. So Climate Fresque, in just 3 hours, allows people to really immerse themselves in all those different concepts to get a better understanding of what causes the things that create climate risks, as well as how to address those. It's pretty good for 3 hours. So I'm going to walk you through a little mini version. It's typically 3 hours, and I don't have that much time with you. So I'm just going to give you a taster of what that is. Before I go there, I just want to show you a little bit about behavior change. So behavior change is based on, let me get rid of that, is based on this thing called a social ecological model. So basically any change basically occurs at all these levels. At the individual level, it's you. It's you as one person. It's your child, it's your mother, it's whomever who wants to make some kind of change. So let's say I wanted to stop smoking. Okay, so I've made that decision to stop smoking. I will have some success for a very limited amount of time if it's just me. But when I involve the interpersonal level, which is usually my household or my friends or what have you, and I have them as my accountability buddies, and they're also going to stop smoking, and they're also going to cheer me on when I do well, and when I kind of fall off the path, they kind of get me back on. I'm much more likely to succeed. Now, when I get the community involved, no, my word community fell off. When I get the community involved, it's even more so. So I live in a gorgeous little community in South Dublin where everyone kind of takes care of each other, and we all support each other. I've never seen anything like it, quite honestly. But when that community is involved, you're much more likely to continue that change. You have a motivation that's constantly around you. And then when you bring it to the organizational level, which is where you all are, you have an incredible impact in terms of how you can actually change behaviors. And finally, at the policy or the enabling environment, that's laws and things like that, which you may think, I don't really have any impact on that. But if you look at France, you'll see that you actually can have an impact. Look at all those people in Paris that are just taking to the streets, all the people in Israel taking to the streets. It makes an impact. So what we do with that information is we understand there's only 3 types of content. Just 3. It's basically teaching about knowledge, teaching skills, or teaching attitudes and behaviors. And so what we do is we figure out what knowledge people need, what skills they need, and then what attitudes and behaviors need to be influenced or adjusted. And there's different methodologies for each one of those. So knowledge, I'm just doing exactly what I'm doing now. I'm just talking at you. Skills is where I'm asking you to actually apply that knowledge through some kind of mechanism. So whether it's demonstration or an assessment or something like that. And behaviors and attitudes, it's my favorite because it's where you actually get people to step into the shoes of someone who's being affected by whatever that issue is. So in the prisons, we were talking about violence. So we're having them do role plays about what it's like to be bullied, what it's like to be attacked. And they were understanding them from a different perspective about what it's like to be affected by the things that some of them may have been contributing to. By putting themselves in the shoes of someone who's been affected by that, it makes all the difference. You can see that they go, wow, okay, now I get it. And we can start to address the barriers. One of the best ways to do this is games. Games allow people to take on a different role or a different persona. And so here we are at Climate Fresque. Okay, so typically, like I said, a Climate Fresque is about 90 minutes, or is about 3 hours, which we don't have. But this is the typical breakdown. But what we're going to do today is I'm just going to give you, a taste of it. So I know that we have 4 participants. I have Tanya in the group. Tanya is already on the board. You'll see her here. I also see Jack on the board. I don't think he's playing. Who else is playing with me today?
We have Luke. We have Rob.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to send you an invitation. 1 second. So I'm going to invite you as a visitor, which means you don't have to sign in with an account. All you have to do is basically write your name on the where it's prompted and then just enter visitor. Firefox is a little bit better, but Chrome also works at times. Let's see how it goes, yeah? All right. While they do that, I'm going to ask the rest of you to go to menti.com, menti.com. I'll put it in the chat box. Okay. When you're prompted for a code, just enter this. And I'm asking you questions, 2 questions. What's your current thinking about climate change? And then what your current behaviors are around climate change. So I need the mural people to go to Mural and find themselves there. And then everybody else, can you join me at Menti and just give me your inputs? Ooh, okay. And we can see it popping up. Jack, can you see the numbers on the screen? You see a graph?
I can.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. Okay, I got a lot of you right in the middle. Not bad. And it is anonymous, so you're welcome to say you don't know much at all. Okay, there's one. All right, everybody's sitting right in the middle. I guess I should have made a 5-point scale. All right. Not bad. Okay, let me see on my mural where we are. And I don't have everybody else. Oh, no, we've got Owen with us. Welcome, Owen. There we are. They're all down here. Okay. I don't know who you are. I've got down here a visiting cat, shrimp, a horse. That's okay. No worries. All right. So Luke, I'm going to make you participant 1. Whoops. Okay. And can I have someone come to participant 2 here? I'm circling it. All right, Tanya, thank you. So Tanya is going to be participant 2. Oops. Can I have someone come to participant 3? I'm circling it. Okay, Rob. Thank you, Rob. I've got some mural veterans here. That's good. Okay, anyone here for number 4? Maybe Ashley? Okay, and who do I have? Who's my number? Who's over here? Who's the visiting horse? I'm not sure who that 5th person is. No, but unknown. Okay. Okay, unknown. That's no worries. We can go from there. I'm not sure who you are, but that's okay. You're very welcome. Okay. So what happens in a Climate Fresque is there's basically 5 rounds of cards. And these cards each show a different determinant or factor that either contributes is a cause of, is a consequence, something around climate change. And these are topics, or these are words that you've heard before, and you may not know what they are, and that's okay. What I want you to do is, the 5 of you that are on the call with me, I want you to turn on your microphones, and I want you to use the mural to put them in some type of order. So what we're going to do first is we're going to read cards, and then I'm going to ask you as a group to put them in order. Okay, so let me zoom in. So Luke, can you read the caption for sea level rise here for me?
Yeah, I'll just zoom in now, Nancy. One
No
second.
worries.
So for sea level rise, since 1900, sea levels have risen by 20 centimeters. This is caused by the thermal expansion of ocean waters and the melting of glaciers and ice sheets.
Gorgeous. Okay. Tanya, can I ask you to please read the caption for melting sea ice?
Sure. Melting sea ice does not make the sea level rise, just like melting ice cubes in a drink does not make the glass overflow.
Very nice. Usually people are surprised by that. Rob, can you read the caption for rising air temperatures?
Yes, the average air temperature at the surface of the Earth has increased by 1.2 degrees since 1900. Possible scenarios predict that this increase will reach between 1.5 degrees and 5 degrees by 2100. During the last ice age, 20,000 years ago, the average air temperature was only 5 degrees lower than today, and warming up took 10,000 years.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Ashley, can you please, Ashley, can you please read additional greenhouse effect?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. The greenhouse effect is a natural phenomenon, and incidentally, the first natural greenhouse gas is water vapor. Without the greenhouse effect, the planet would be 33 degrees colder. But CO2 and other greenhouse gases related to human activities amplify the greenhouse effect, which warms up the climate.
Gorgeous. Thank you. Okay, who is, I don't know who this 4th person, Natalie. Okay, Natalie, I can change your name to Natalie. And can you read that for me? Natalie, we can't hear you. Okay, I'll read for Natalie. CO2 is the main anthropogenic greenhouse gas emitted by human activities. These emissions come from our use of fossil fuels and from deforestation. And then we've got 2 extra cards. So Luke, I'm putting you and Tanya to work a little bit more. If you could read fossil fuels, Luke.
Sure thing. So fossil fuels are coal, oil, and natural gas. They're used mainly in buildings, transportation, and industry. They emit carbon dioxide when burned.
Excellent. And Tanya, can you read human activities?
Sure. Let me see if I see it.
I can do it
I
for you.
can't.
Okay. It says this
sorry,
is where it all.
I can't. Yeah,
It's a quick.
I thought okay. This is where it all begins.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to hide these. You can uncover them if you want. Just click on here and click on the captions just to make it a little bit cleaner. And what I'm going to ask the 5 of you to do is basically talk it through and move these cards into the order that you think it should go. So what causes what? Down here in this playground down here. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and I'll let you start talking to each other.
Hey guys, first thing that comes to mind is that for sea levels to rise, you need something to melt, which would be something like, a glacier. But for that to melt, you need additional greenhouse effect, which might come from human activities like fossil fuel use. What's everyone thinking?
Agree. Is that first?
So
Yeah.
human activities first, fossil fuels. We chuck them in order, Luke, and then spin them around if we need to. So
That sounds good, Rob.
fossil fuels, additional greenhouse effects, rising air temperatures, melting sea ice. How does that look? CO2 emissions are going to jump in somewhere here, maybe.
Yeah, that looks good. So the only thing with sea ice now is that, does that cause the sea levels to rise? Or, you know, that kind of glass analogy that Nancy gave us, where the ice melts but the water doesn't overflow?
Yeah, but would it come after sea level rise? I would have thought it would have contributed to sea level rise somewhat. I'm interested to know why not, but okay. So how do you expand the little description again?
Yep, so you click on it and then click on this little black box here.
Okay, melting ice does not make the sea level rise, just like melting ice cube. Well, it doesn't make the glass overflow, but it'll... I get you, right. Well, depends. The ice is above water. Sea level rises. Little black box, where's that gone? Is it edit thumbnail, Nancy? You said there, little black box.
Yep,
And you
so click above it. And it says show caption.
All right, I can't see that show caption for some reason.
So just click on the card, and you'll see the black box right above it. I'm going to pop when the little menu pops up. Are you trying to
cause by?
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Right.
This is caused by thermal expansion of ocean waters and the melting of glaciers and ice sheets. Well, I would have thought that's the same thing, melting sea ice. But okay, well, don't know if there's anything else there, team, that you think we should change around. Activities. What do you think, Luke?
I think, yeah, it looks okay to me, but I'm sure we're about to find out something different.
Okay, Natalie, Ashley, Tanya, any contributions?
I'd agree with the current state of play.
Good answer. Tanya, Natalie? Okay.
Thinking.
Okay, no worries. So this is where typically people go, oh, I'm not quite sure. And so what we do then is we kind of jump in and we say, okay, great. Thinking. And I talk you through some of the changes that I would make. So this is great. I think this definitely is a direct cause. Rising air temperatures, I'm going to put it over here. It's not going to be a completely linear line. Rising air temperatures definitely is contributes to the human activities, which of course is a much larger line. Okay, so our line's not going to be completely straight. Our line's going to start to veer off, and that's okay. And then these are kind of floating out there because they don't really contribute directly to any of these. There are steps in between additional greenhouse effect and human activity. So I'm going to kind of plot it out here, and I'm going to put it here. Now, I've done many fresks, and every single one of them is a little bit different. What that tells us is that there's no one answer to fixing climate change, but there are these 40 factors that are the same throughout. I would then advance you to the next step where I give you the next set of cards, which is another 10 cards, and then you have to start to fit them in with this other group. In the end, you have 42 cards and a really complex overview of how things cause some factors and then what the consequences are of those other factors. We start to see things like human disease and pandemics like we just experienced, as well as conflict and then fights for food and resources and things like that. So you'll see that climate change is not just about droughts and all the natural disasters that are being caused, but it's also directly affecting us as a people. So I would start to ask you to draw arrows and making sure that this makes sense to you, and you'll start to see, now you saw two people that took over because they probably feel more confident with climate change, and I had 3 kind of standing back. And that's typically how a fresque goes. So at the beginning, the people kind of take off who have more experience, more confidence in climate change terminology or cause and effect. And then I would say about 45 minutes in, you start to see a shift where the quieter people all of a sudden start to get comfortable with the terminology. It's a gorgeous process to watch. What we do after we do these 5 rounds of cards and everyone is really spent, we take a little bathroom break, and then we come over here and we basically come over here and then we talk about solutions. I've lost my lines. People start to play with the mural. That's good. They're comfortable. I don't know what this line is. Let me just delete it. So we start to come up with solutions. What kinds of solutions are difficult to implement with a weak impact? What are easy to implement with a strong impact? So people start to brainstorm. So let me quickly do that. You've got some Post-it notes on here, my 5 people. And I know we have a couple other people, feel free to jump in. Just click on a Post-it note and put in what a solution is that you can think of that you at the individual level, you at the community level, or you at the organizational level can do to influence behavior change, climate change. So write it on the Post-it note and then put it on the map wherever you think it goes.
Nancy, while they're putting in their solutions, could you give the rest of us an idea of what are optimal numbers and groups that you typically complete the fresque?
Yeah, so online we usually have groups of 7. I do use a platform where I'm able to have groups of 7, so it's not just one call with 7 people, but it's a platform called InSpace, so I can have up to about 35 people on that, and then there's just different rooms that everybody can kind of rotate through. And face-to-face, we have tables of 7. So I may have up to 98 people in a room, but there's only 7 people at a table. Any more than that, people start to disengage. We also have a session for children, so it's quite honestly the exact same factors, but we bring language to about 5th grade readability level. And what we find is that we bring people in as individuals, and they meet each other in the group, but then we work with organizations. Of course, everybody knows each other, and they already have a leg up on what kind of resources are available and what the gaps are at the organizational level, as well as in the communities that they serve. And so they're far more advanced in terms of what their solutions are that are actually feasible. It's really quite brilliant. And I'll give you a link of how you can find out how I can come and do this with your group. Okay, look at these gorgeous solutions. So I've got things like a community mindful group walk, which somebody has placed a strong pack and easy to implement. Nice. Educating yourself, one at the top. I agree with you. Let's put it up here. Really, really easy. Open up conversations with people around you to feel comfortable talking about it. I'm going to put it up here as well. Look at this. Who's doing this? I'm not sure who just wrote this. Oh, Rob. Okay, Rob is moving his flexitarian. I've never heard of that word, but I love it. Diet, eating less carbon intensive food and drink. This is actually one of the best ways. Something very, what did I do with it? Oh, here it is. It's one of the best ways in terms of addressing climate change. And we talk about that in the session at great length. Participating in Climate Fresque. Oh, good plug there. Thank you. Take an interest in a work green team. Very nice. Excellent. Easy to implement. Depends on who you are. Reducing home energy by boiling only what you need. These are really great solutions. And in a normal fresque, we do take 30 minutes and we take it apart and we figure out what some of the best solutions are and what everybody in the group actually feasibly do. Okay. So we also go through an emotional component. Some people actually get quite emotional talking about this, usually with youth. And so we give a space for people to process their emotions. Sometimes it's anger, frustration, no problem. So we process that so they don't walk out feeling stressed. They walk out feeling a little bit more hopeful than they were when they first came in. Okay, but this right here is basically our overview of what we do for the whole FRESC to encompass the 3 hours. All right, and then finally we talk about the 5 different social ecological model levels to help them identify solutions that they can do at the individual level, at their household level, or with friends, at their community, with their organization, and then what they can do to influence government. And Ireland is really beautiful in terms of having a pathway for individuals to give voice to the government. Gorgeous. Okay, so here we are. 31 people say they have some knowledge. The gorgeous thing about Climate FRESC is it gives you a lot of knowledge in about 3 hours, but it also changes your attitudes and behaviors. I said before that these types of the knowledge, the skills, and the behaviors are taught using different methodologies. The FRESC basically takes knowledge and it takes behaviors and attitudes and it melds it together into a gorgeous methodology that can teach you so much in just 3 short hours. There's also a version for experts. So my experts who are in the session that say, I know a lot about about climate change, there's a 7-hour session actually that expands on this content. Okay, and I'm trying to get to my next slide and I'm not sure how to do that. Okay. Here we go. Next slide. How climate friendly do you think you are? I'm not sure that everybody got this. I guess not. No. Oh, there it is. I do some climate friendly actions. So this is just basically how friendly you think you are with climate. Okay. So I'm about to wrap up, but I'm going to give you some links that you can follow to get more information. And I'm going to put it in the mural, in the chat box. Okay.
And we'll also follow up, likewise to Tim and Colm, Nancy, with all of your additional materials.
Definitely. Yep, no worries. So that's me. Again, this was very condensed, but it was just a taster of what the process is like, and I'm hoping that you learned something about climate change today. So thank you for your inputs. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Really fascinating, and yeah, being able to see it in person, but also on the bigger screen would be incredible. And as we mentioned, in the future, facilitating a workshop and potentially a larger climate FRESC here in Ireland with Vyra and yourself would be something that would, I think, be really amazing for a lot of people. And yeah, what a brilliant teaser.
Excellent. I'm loving all these little claps. That's a good behavior change motivator. Thank you for all that.
Yeah. And Nancy, before we wrap up your piece, I think it would be good to hear about some of the interesting work you're currently engaged with, as well as, what are some other resources, or where can people find you, or what sort of info would you like to promote now at the end of your bit? But I would love to hear more about some of the projects you're doing at the moment.
Sure. So right now I'm working with the Global Disaster Preparedness Center. So it's based in the US, but they also have a group in the Netherlands with the Climate Center, the Red Cross Climate Center. And we're currently developing a training curriculum for how youth can become leaders to influence climate change policy. It's fascinating because the team gave me a TOR, a terms of reference, and they said, this is what we want taught. And what our team says is we need to talk to people from the target group. So we had a content interview with people from the Solomon Islands, people mostly from the Pacific and other areas where they're actually being moved out of their homes because it's being flooded. And so we had this call and the whole focus shifted because what the youth are saying that they need and what their gaps are and what their strengths are is very different from what the older people thought that they were. Of course. So the youth are leading this whole thing, and the youth know what needs to be done, and the youth know so much about the best processes and methodologies. So we're opening our ears and saying, yes, okay, we hear you. And so it's been a very interesting process because most humanitarian agencies are very old school, run by people in the Western realm, and don't really understand some of the things that in terms of how to influence people's behaviors and attitudes at the levels where it needs to happen. So that is an amazing piece that we're working on. We're also working with Save the Children on some non-communicable disease work in Albania, which has one of the highest rates of non-communicable diseases of diabetes and cancer and cardiovascular. And the kids are leading that charge as well. So youth are going to change the world. We just need to get out of their way.
I think you've led me to a question that I wanted to ask you since we began the conversation around working together on this webinar. And yeah, if you had unlimited resources, what one solution would you focus on at a youth level or otherwise that you think could make a massive change?
Really good question. So we have been trying to put together a platform where people can come in, enter in what their issues are, and we give them a series of prompts using behavioral science. They are able to, we're using AI, we scrape the internet for any kind of evidence base around that specific topic in that specific area, and then come up with a behavior change plan. We've been testing it with people and it's all manual. But with this boom of AI and with the youth that we've been working with, we know that there's so much potential to do it faster, better, and much more at the community level. So when we leave it at the higher levels, it's rarely effective. So we are developing these community-based systems. Like we have an advisory board of 22 people from across Africa and Asia. They're not paid a penny, but they give us so much information, and then we build their capacity. We run webinars and we give them free educational material. They have an Ebola outbreak in Uganda and they say, send us materials, and we do that free of charge. And we want that to be something that's accessible to all. So that's something I would love to develop, because the youth, they're rock stars. They can do something so fast and they know what the issues are.
Really, really inspiring. And I don't want to hog the final questions myself, so I would love if anybody in the room has a question for Nancy, either fire away on camera or put it into the chat and we can hear some of your engagements. Nancy, in terms of that project, is there any way that anybody can get involved or contribute in some way?
Oh gosh, yeah, very much so. So it's basically our small little team that are developing content, but there's so much room for other people to help us to not only develop content, but improve our platform. So very much so. So I'll put my contact information on how you can follow up. That would be terrific. And again, Ireland is such a gorgeous little testing area, this beautiful petri dish of beautiful things and how people can be innovative. So I'm just really grateful to be in this group.
Thanks. We do have a question in from Melissa. Says, do you ever have someone say it's too late to do anything? Why bother? And what do you do if yes?
Yeah, people who say that to me are usually the people who are at a level where they're tired and they're not really keen to try something innovative. I never ever hear that from a youth. They're the ones who are saying, well, let's try it. Like this program that we ran in the Irish prisons, the Irish Red Cross youth group were the ones that were saying, let's also educate the families of inmates so that when they come out, they have a soft place to land. So they understand what it's like to basically step in their shoes. And we did that. And one of the aspects of this program was that we were able to reduce the recidivism rate. So less people were going back to prison because they had a safer space outside the prison than when having to go back in, this cycle of continuing to go to prison. So has it happened that people say, no, we've tried that, it won't work? Yes, we go around them. They're a barrier. So we either educate them and kind of influence them. And if that's not possible, we go around and we find other people who are willing to try new things.
Okay, and the last one in from Tanya is, how often are you running climate sessions or climate fresk sessions?
Currently, we're doing 3 a week. So again, they're 3-hour sessions. We do face-to-face as well as online. So, but 3 a week, we run them at 9 a.m. But if there's a request for a different time, we're happy to accommodate that as well. Yeah, and as we mentioned as well, over the course of the next few months, we'll be able to
communicate to the wider audience about any of these workshops or webinars or anything that you're going to be doing. But yeah, I think at that, it's been super engaging, Nancy, different to what I've experienced in a webinar, and inspiring. And yeah, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Vyra team. Yeah.
Thanks for thinking of us.
Thanks so much. No worries. Okay, everybody. So we're at a point now. We're at the final juncture as we go into the last section of the webinar. And it's certainly a last but not least situation where we've covered the practical, the behavioural, and touched on some of the emotional side. But now we're really going to dive into that emotional side even further, and what we could say is maybe the psychological side of all of this, which is really about the inner workings of how you think about climate change, but more widely how you get involved. And this guest is somebody who people may already know, and he's well known as a comedian, but also as a best-selling author, particularly for his most recent work with the book Climate Warrior, which I have said has been a topic of discussion for us at Vyra. Also a Chris Kindle gift amongst all of us at Vyra as well. So this all came to a head about a month ago. We went to see Colm do his Climate Warrior piece in stand-up form, and yeah, how he manages to make such a serious topic belly-achingly hilarious just really shows his level of intelligence and creativity when it comes to using his skill set to talk about climate change. There's a lot of quotes I could touch on, but I think the one that has most relevance for me coming into this was one I seen when Colm did a piece about Climate Warrior from Post, and he talks about the concept of worry, and as a professional worrier, how even in his wildest fantasies, everybody's got fun insurance. So yeah, I'll open up the floor to Colm and let him introduce himself, but ultimately end this webinar on a really high note. So thanks for coming, Colm. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Jack. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
If you do get the sense that I'm talking from the heart of heavy industry, I'm in a booth here at Republic of Work, and there's air conditioning to keep me alive because it's quite a small booth. But if that's what that sound might be. First of all, I want to pay tribute to Jack, who achieved something that I think is probably key to the whole environmental industry, because he transferred upwards of nearly 100 people from one website to another without friction. And if anything, this whole thing is about bringing people with you. So I think we should give him a virtual round of applause for and the rest of the team at Vyra for bringing so many people from one website to another. It's also a tribute to all your commitment, because I know an earlier version of me would be like, what? Another website? Right, I'm gone. I'm never having anything to do with climate change again. So thanks so much for sticking with me. I know you're probably heading for lunch and all of that, so I'll try not to keep you too long. There might be a degree of screen sharing, warning you early on, but hopefully not too much. My name is Colm O'Regan, and this is sort of like a webinar-y version of a show I've been doing around the country called Climate Warrior, which is also linked to the book, which I don't know if anybody's heard of it. If you haven't, I've made sure that you can't avoid it by placing it as my background image. By the way, does it appear backwards or the right way around to you? Because I couldn't figure out how to reverse it, so in the end I reversed the image. And so let me know. As far as I can see, it looks the right way around, but give me a thumbs down if it's backwards on the screen in front of you. So the first time, thumbs down, it's backwards. Okay, or thumbs up. I'm getting all sorts of mixed messages. Somebody write it in the chat there. Anyway, it's Climate Warrior. And the first time I did this show was sort of intimidating. I did it at Dublin Fringe. And for some reason, on the debut night of the show, 80% of the entire audience was one Danish high school class. And by class, I mean their class in school, not middle class. And they had just come to Dublin on a school tour and were looking for something cultural just to tick a box. So I felt I had extreme inferiority complex, not just because they were 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, and I was clearly the lamest person they'd ever seen, but also because as an Irish person, I felt like such a climate laggard compared to Scandinavians. And it's a thing we do a lot in this country, is pejoratively, or we belittle ourselves in comparison to other countries, and it doesn't help us, I think. So whenever anything's going wrong in Ireland, they'll tell us what they're doing in Scandinavia. If in Ireland there's a headline saying, oh, the rate of uptake of paternity leave has reached an all-time low, they'll say in Scandinavia, there you get 4 years paternity leave, and you don't even have to have had a child. You just need to be an emotionally available male. Like it's always some headline like that. So Scandinavia, they're always doing things much better climate-wise. In Denmark, they're wind turbine, offshore wind leaders. Whereas in Ireland, we're still looking for planning permission for the second set of wind turbines offshore. We put one up off Arklow, but we got away with that because nobody said anything to anyone in Arklow. Everyone in Arklow was looking the other way, and they put up the turbine. Whereas now we're looking for planning permission that's taking too long. I do not want to advocate lawlessness, but if I was a wind turbine, offshore wind turbine person, I'd throw the turbine up 10 miles out to sea and just see who'd make it take it down. You know, oh, you're the only one with the equipment. So I don't think the council are going to send somebody out in a van. Anyway, would never advocate lawlessness. So Denmark, they're always doing that. In Sweden, you know, you go there, what a haven it is to cycle in Sweden. You all tense when you're cycling on the street, expecting something bad to happen, and they throw bouquets at you. They say, welcome, this is cycling paradise. Nobody can hurt you here. And you can't believe it. It's amazing. Whereas in Dublin, you're cycling and somebody's shouting at you, just hurling abuse at you, telling you to get off the bike. You're in the way, get out of the way. And it's your own mother. You know, so it's a different attitude to cycling. In Norway, they are hoping to electrify their entire car fleet. And you know, that's the entire car fleet going to be electrified. They have a target. Whereas in Ireland, we're still trying to charge cars off our phones, you know, and it's different. And Norway, I think, teaches us what you can do if you have ambition, if you have go ahead, if you have the right leadership. And also, if you have €500 billion worth of oil money, you can achieve anything you want. You really can achieve your dreams. So it's with a certain inferiority that I was trying to talk to people about climate worry. I was explaining to them, and I explain to you now, that this, my book and the show, it's not about tips, about there are some tips, but that's not the core of it. I'll tell you why, because I find that tips to be a greener person, I get irrationally annoyed by them. I don't know if anybody find this. When there is a tip that says, here, how to make yourself more environmentally aware, I take that as a direct dig at all my choices. I take this globally applicable tip, personalize it to myself, and get annoyed. It's something we do. It's something we need to stop taking it personally, but I don't want to get at you personally. Like, you know, you see suggestions for your child's lunch for school. Try and make it something sustainable and nutritious and locally grown. And I get annoyed. I say, have you met my children? They will only eat things that are yellow and that are made by companies that are currently huge donors to Trump's re-election campaign. My children just love the taste of modern slavery for some reason, right? If you're in rural, they talk about, oh, use more public transport. I get annoyed because I'm from the country, and I remember rural transport. If you just as a little thought experiment, put 2 rural destinations into Google Maps and then attempt to travel between them by public transport. Google Maps will just come back and say, to be honest, you'd be better off getting your father to drive you. That's what happens. So I find sometimes tips can be quite, people take it personally. Neither do I focus on what we really need to do in order to achieve climate justice, is dismantle capitalism, turn everything on its head. It's the structures, the power structures that got us here. Not because we don't need to do that. It's just that I know a couple of capitalists and they're sound. You know, so I don't want to start with that. What I want to do is focus on maybe how we deal with the worry, and and only just my own personal thing about how I stopped taking all the bad news personally, and I didn't allow it to stop me from doing things. Because I feel like this year, and particularly the latter end of 2022, we crossed a Rubicon of worry, where it felt like climate worry, which had been a fringe worry, and you could dismiss it as the area of people who are just anxious anyway. No, it suddenly became more mainstream, and I'll tell you why. For some reason, last summer, something changed, And I think it was, you noticed that people in Ireland didn't enjoy the heat wave like they normally do. Like when we get a heat wave in Ireland, we are the embodiment of carpe diem. We run out and grab all the sun we can and hope that that will do us then for a month. We are camels for sunshine when the good weather comes. We will soak it up. We will assume it will turn to tan, even if it's peeling, and we're actually starting to cook later on that night. And the expression of this carpe diem, I've seen it in old heat waves. I remember a few years ago, one of the hottest days of the year, the hot day that year, I was walking along the canal in Dublin, the Grand Canal. It's called the Grand Canal because it's fine as canals go. It does an adequate job of moving water over areas of irregular height. And there was a man walking towards me, and it was that beautiful day, July the 15th, I remember it well, 2012. And he walked towards me, and it was such a beautiful day. He was walking a small dog. Without warning, he picked up the little dog and jumped him and the little dog into the canal to cool off. What an expression of joie de vivre. He hadn't consulted with the dog, and so the dog was rather surprised, and the dog looked at me over its owner's shoulder as it went into the water, and the expression, I can only describe it as the dog saying, "My phone." You know, that kind of thing where banter overtakes logistics, right? That's how we used to be. Last summer, you saw stuff you didn't see before. I was in a shop one day. There was two people talking. One said to the other, "I think we'll have a barbecue." And the other one said, "When are you thinking of having it?" And the first person said, "Tuesday week." Something has changed. Weather has become climate if Irish people are planning barbecues more than a week in advance. This is what, the way we used to have barbecues in this country is that you would say, "We'll have a barbecue now within the next hour, or fuck it, we leave it for the year." Like, that's how it used to be. So something has changed. And it felt like such a pity that we were all worrying about this. Even though we just come out of the pandemic, everything was fine. Everything was, we were starting to reconnect with people. It was so weird last summer, the hottest day of the year, 30 degrees. I was also at the first wedding I'd been to since the pandemic ended. And I felt worried about the climate, yet delighted at the opportunity of the return to the other normality. What a sort of, a mix of things. Existential worry and pandemic starting, pandemic worry over. And weddings are an expression of our innate ability to connect as Irish people. I love weddings. I had been blasé about them. I had got to the age where I'd been to enough weddings that if somebody sent me an email saying, "What's your postal address?" I'd say, "Oh, for fuck's sake, that's a wedding." And that would be another weekend ruined and €500 down the tubes. Now I love weddings. I love every aspect of them. I love the wedding DJ. I love the man in a stripy shirt and black slacks who you can ask to play any requests. At the royal wedding of Meghan Markle and Harry, the wedding DJ was Idris Elba, Stringer Bell, Luther. He was from the Marvel movies, a James Bond potential. You couldn't go up to him and say, "Would you ever throw on Rock the Boat? There's no one on the floor." Every single thing about a wedding. The end of the royal wedding ended with people getting into Rolls Royces and Bentleys going off to their next destination. And everything knew what was going to happen. An Irish wedding ends with 30 worried guests desperately trying to get into the residence bar with one room key, trying to guess the name of a possible surname of somebody who might be staying. So all of those things we had missed. And yet there was this existential worry with the heat outside. But we still enjoyed it. And we still enjoyed that incredible connection of my favorite bit of a wedding, the in-between bit, the bit after the ceremony, before the dinner, where you're standing around and drinking that juice that helps you mingle with people, Prosecco. You will talk to anybody about anything after 3 glasses of Prosecco. You will talk to the groom's granny about supply chain issues. She will tell you there's another tanker stuck in the Suez Canal, and you'll say that must be where my replacement NutriBullet blades are. So this is that perfect connection. And yet we're all connecting for the first time, and there is this backdrop of climate worry. Something had changed. I was annoyed about that. Why is this impinging on us? And I was getting defensive because the thing about climate worry is, for somebody my age, in my mid-40s, it challenges something that we hold dear, that once you turn 40, you get to blame young people for all of the bad things in the world because you assume they will have it easier than you. Like you'll say things like, "That's the problem with young people. They're not resilient enough, not like us. They're always opening up about their emotions. Why don't they do what we did, which is push those emotions right down until they turn into diamonds?" That's how it should be. It shouldn't be the way it is, which is that now it looks like just generations that come after us will have it worse than us. That's not the natural run of things. That's not how it's supposed to go. There's supposed to be progress. The generation after us is supposed to have it easier so we can tell them how hard we had it. It's one of the joys of turning 40, to turn to people and say, you don't know yourselves. What are we to do now that they'll have it worse? I think we should say sorry. This first came to my mind about September 2019. I went to the climate march in Dublin, the big one. And this is where all the schools, they'd been kind of striking for a few weeks. And then it culminated in a huge demonstration. I went there with my 2 children. To give you an idea, pre-pandemic, how long ago that was, they were both toddlers. We brought them there in a buggy. Before the pandemic seems like another era. To give you an idea of how long ago that was, they were toddlers in buggies. Then now they're both fully qualified electricians. That's how long ago September 2019 was. And I was there and I was watching as all of this was going on. My little girls were looking at teenagers on the stage and I saw them forming a connection. And I saw that connection make me be irrelevant because my little girls were looking at 14 and 15-year-olds and they were talking in a way to each other about climate change. I felt left out. I was looking at all of these posters and banners around the place. There is no planet B. There was stuff about Greta. And it was like a truth, the truth that what was happening to younger generations was something to do with the life either I was leading or not doing anything about changing, that we were bequeathing something to them. And when somebody gets you with a truth, I don't know if you ever found, particularly if it's younger people and very young people speaking truth to you, you get very annoyed. Like do you ever notice if you're any parents on the call, do you ever bring your children into a museum and despite years of telling them about the importance of telling the truth, they watch as you lie to the person at the ticket desk about their ages in order to get in cheaper. And then they say afterwards, was that a lie, Daddy? And you would say, shut up, I changed your nappies. You get defensive, right? You get so I was getting defensive, watching the feeling of irrelevance, watching these young people have this existential angst about the planet when they shouldn't. Who's to blame for that? And when you feel like you might have something to do with the problem, you get defensive. And when I get defensive, I go to where I think a lot of people might go, particularly my age. I go to my happy place. Now, give you an idea of the happy place. The happy place for a lot of us is, and I'm going to share my screen and see will this come up. The happy place is, does this come up now? The 80s, right? So can you see a picture there in front? Give me a quick shout. I won't be able to say if Jack, if you can see. Can you see a young man there in shorts? Or can you still see just me?
Can indeed.
Can indeed, right? So that's the 80s. I find when a lot of people my age, when they're talking about sustainability, when they're being talked to about sustainability, they get annoyed and they say, don't be talking to me about sustainability. I grew up in the 80s. That was sustainability. Greta, don't be talking to me about fast fashion or reduce, reuse, recycle. Look at me there. I'm wearing shorts that are so short, I think I handed them down to myself. Look at me dressed like a 26-year-old woman going to electric picnic. We get annoyed. We said, Greta, I know all about sustainability. Don't be talking to me about fossil fuel use. You think you're so great. You took a boat to a climate change conference in New York to reduce the amount of fossil fuel emissions. Well, let me tell you, my father used to turn off the key of the car 500 yards before the house and then freewheel home in order to save the bit of petrol. That's sustainability. Don't be talking to me about energy efficient ways of heating the house. We had the ultimate energy efficient way of heating a house, which was not to turn on the heating. That was energy efficient. When we had a range that was lit at 8 in the morning, it was turned off at the same time every day, regardless of the temperature outside. The heat had to do you. You just kept the door closed. Oh, don't be talking to me, Greta, about that. We had hot water. We had baths that were an inch deep, Greta. And one time we had a visitor who didn't know that the bath was supposed to be an inch deep. She came and she took all the hot water for the bath, Greta. She never got invited back. That's the efficiency of energy use. We used to watch Dallas, not for the plot, just to see how much water they put into the bath. That was luxury. Don't be talking to me about reduce, reuse, recycle. We had a hierarchy of cleaning cloths in our house, Greta. At the top were tea towels that were never used because they were for a visitor who still hadn't arrived because they weren't important enough. My mother was waiting for JFK to come back from the dead or a pope to visit. At the very bottom, if you spilled something, my mother would say, here's only your father's old underpants. He won't mind. So the 80s, we always go back to that. All this, oh, don't be talking to me, the young people, look at your phones, look at you getting lifts everywhere. Don't be talking to us about sustainability. We were sustainable. We grew up in the 80s, Greta, and we get really annoyed. We get really defensive. And the question that anybody might ask, I don't know whether you would agree, the question anyone might ask in that scenario is, so what happened then, Colm? And I'll tell you what happened, everybody. We got fucking sick of the 80s. We got sick of inch-deep bats. We got sick of 18 people wearing the same trousers, one after the other. We just decided we were going to have a bit of luxury. So the 80s is no longer an excuse. So I knew that the 80s, even though it's my happy place, is not an excuse for not engaging. I knew that you would have to find out stuff about this. And so I started to read a bit more. But the problem is, and I don't know what other people have found on the call, we're all at different stages of the journey. The hardest thing is at the start of the journey where you go, right, I'm going to take an interest. And then suddenly the internet starts to follow you around with some of the worst bad news you can find. Have you noticed that as soon as you start clicking on links about one problem, that's all you ever see? The internet presents you. It's like it walks around after you, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, have you heard about olives, Colm? And you go, no, but I think you're going to tell me, what about olives? And the internet will say, do you know how olives are harvested? And I'll say, well, I was thinking and hoping that olives are harvested by hand by a smiling Greek grandfather who works in the morning and then in the heat of the day lies down underneath his tree, has a little nap and dispenses wisdom. No, Colm, that's not how olives are harvested. They're harvested with giant hoovers that straddle the trees in a vaguely not very nice sexual way and hoover the olives out of the trees. And do you know what? When they hoover the olives out of the trees, Colm? No, I don't. They do it at night, Colm. That's how they get that freshness, by harvesting the olives at night. And do you know who else lives in trees at night, Colm? I don't know. Birds, Colm. Hundreds of thousands of them. And that's the kind of story that follows you around. Is you didn't know there was a problem with olives. You thought it was just rainforests. That's all you had time for in your brain was rainforests and maybe rhinos. But now you have to worry about olives. Now you have to worry about antipasti. Now you have to worry about what to serve the guests on a little charcuterie board, like because it's going to lead to the death of birds, unless you also serve the birds. Like this is what used to happen. So I found myself plagued by item after item of bad news. And this hinges on a tiny moment. And with I think epiphanies, sometimes we expect them to be huge, but sometimes they're really small. Somebody said to me, you know, Colm, the internet is set up for you to just click on misery links, read a bit, move on, get more depressed, then click on more misery links. If you really want to find out and become engaged, you have to engage. You have to read books, longer things. You have to listen to longer podcasts. You have to find a way to take the information in where it is constructive, where they tell you about solutions and not just, have you heard what's wrong next? And this seems like you've all logged on for Colm to say, you should read books. But it is sometimes as simple as that engaging means actually counterintuitively consuming more. And on one of these things, and I'll share my screen with you again, and hopefully it will be frictionless, as they say in tech. I found something by somebody who is a very clever person who has a podcast called How to Save a Planet. And she, I hope, give me, if you can see her there, that's Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She has a book called All We Can Save, and also has a podcast called How to Save a Planet. And sometimes you find things that will help you along the way in one area. So you may be familiar with this already. People are constantly talking to her and saying, I feel despair. What can I do? The problem is so enormous. Where do I start? And she gives them this very simple Venn diagram. So I'm absolutely at pains to tell you this is not my idea. This is somebody else's idea. but I'm happy to share it. The idea is that you ask yourself 3 questions. What do you love doing? What are you good at? What needs to be done? And in the middle, you ask yourself, where might those intersect in my life? And in that bit in the middle, that's where you might start. And this is not the ultimate solution. It'll be a flawed start. You won't get it right, but it overcomes the inertia of starting somewhere and starting and getting confidence. I found this incredibly powerful, not because partly because it gave me ideas of what to do next, but also it kind of reinforced stuff that I was kind of doing anyway. And sometimes what you need isn't ideas on what to start with. It's just encouragement to continue doing the thing that you thought you might be a bit of an idiot for doing. So I would ask you all, and we may not have time interactively at the end because it's getting close to time, is to ask yourself those questions and see where you might start. Because I've done most of the talking so far, I might tell you my ones. And I won't be able to see the chat just at the moment because I'm sharing the screen. But so you start here in the middle. So where those intersect, that's where you start. So where do I start? I love making people laugh and I love cycling. Now, this is very important to acknowledge when it comes to trying to make people laugh in the area of climate change. It's really hard. And it's not because climate change is a serious topic. That is not the barrier. We laugh at serious topics all the time. The biggest laughs you'll have are at funerals once they're done correctly, not like right in the middle. It is about release of tension. It's about drama. It's about shared experience. The problem with making people laugh with climate change is that climate change is about doing the right thing. It's about changing for the better. And as we all know, there is nothing funny about doing the right thing. There's nothing funny about changing for the better. What's funny is where you get it wrong. What's funny is where you're subversive. What's funny is where you take the piss. And it's very hard when you're trying to do the right thing to take the piss as you go. Like I can say to you, we really need to do something about helping the pollinators. The pollinators are really important. The pollinators are a cornerstone of the ecosystem. If somebody turned around right in the middle of that and farted, that would be funny, right? Farts are innately funny, even though they have emissions in them. They're just funnier because they are subversive. If I said to you, we need to help the hoverfly, and somebody else said, affect the hoverfly, that's just funnier. It's just funnier to take the piss, to destroy. So when you're talking about humor, when you're talking about how to build connections, you have to ensure that we know who the target is. Like, so when we're all laughing at wasps, it's kind of funny because wasps sting you. So that is the problem. But I'll give you an example of how you can help build alliances. And this will help in humor as well too. Do you remember earlier in the year when people were talking about throwing paint at paintings in art galleries? And it got lots of attention. But people were unsure as to who the victim was or who the target was, because art galleries are free. So if you have no money and you want to see a painting and somebody has thrown paint over it to make a point about the fossil fuel industry, I think that's going to hurt you, the person with no money, more, right? Now, it still got the attention. I just don't know how long it would last for. But there was another protest happened around the same time. In Amsterdam, people were protesting about private jets and how much damage they do to the environment. And they were protesting on bicycles. They were cycling around the jet. And God bless them, the Dutch police were attempting to arrest the cyclists, also on bicycles. So therefore, you had the funniest thing in the world, police on bicycles chasing cyclists around a private jet. But will I tell you very clearly what you knew from looking at that? Who was the man? The person in the private jet. That's the target. Like, private jets are seen as an aspiration. We should be seeing them as wankers. Like, that is how you build connection. And it's so much easier to build connections if you've got people on bicycles chasing each other around, appearing small and appearing funny, and a giant private jet, which is the embodiment of establishment. It's the greatest trick ever pulled, how fossil fuel companies managed to convince the world they were actually anti-establishment. How do they do that? Incredible, right? So that is where humor comes in. But when you do humor, you have to understand who your alliances are with, who the targets are. If there's any suggestion you're punching either left or right or down, humor doesn't work. You need to find the man in order for jokes to work. The other thing I love doing, you saw it there, cycling. I like cycling because it builds community. Cycling, and we laugh with each other about the state of cycle lanes. I love cycle lanes in Ireland. Cycle lanes in Ireland are a bit like a trousers that starts from the knees down, in that it looks like a trousers, but it's functionally useless. And when they open a new cycle lane, though, it's important to be polite and constructive when they say, do you like your new cycle lane? Just say, no, I love it. I just noticed it ends in a wall. But don't shout it. Just suggest maybe that this could be a feature that could be improved in phase 2, that when you're merging, that you don't merge at an airport runway, right? So that's the kind of stuff. So I love cycling. I love the old humor. Let me share my screen very quickly once again. And I realize now I'm running out of time. So I will happily be kicked out, Jack, if people are starting to disappear. We're down to 65 now. Geez, the rest of you must really want some solutions. Anyway, so I've none. This spoiler alert, I've none. So what am I good at? I'm good at being in my mid-40s. And this seems trivial, right? Because sometimes what you're good at is innate and you can do nothing about. I'll tell you what's good about being in your mid-40s is that for some reason, you turn 40, you start to take an interest in stuff outside yourself, right? It's incredible. On my 40th birthday, I woke up, looked out the window, looked across the road and said, how do they get planning permission for that? Never even noticed the skyscraper before. It's just something that happens. And I think this simple thing that I harness it to stick my nose in and to get involved. You know, for some reason, when you turn 40, a high vis appears on your head. It's just amazing. You just start directing traffic at big funerals. It's just something that happens. So when searching for what you're good at, sometimes it's just innate, right? Also, being in my 40s means that I can kind of take lots of bad news because I lived through the 80s, meaning, you know, there was just lots of bad news for an entire decade. And I just became resilient to it. So sometimes when you're thinking about what are you good at, sometimes that is something that's very, very close to you. And you mightn't even realize it. If you're good at spreadsheets, if you're good at organizing people, if you're good at getting about 80% of people to come from one call to another call, like that is a skill. Like every single skill matters. And finally, what needs to be done? And I'll go back to sharing my screen again very briefly. What needs to be done? There's lots of things that need to be done. Things that I've focused on. Everyone needs to feel part of it. We all need to feel like we have a role. That's why I think, look at our skills. What is your skill? If you are a complete arsehole who loves burning furze bushes, but happen to be really good at getting 1,000 people into a room, you could still have a role to play in climate change. You just need to turn your focus. Like we should start, like in terms of, we spread the tent wide in terms of all types of skills. And the final thing is change where we have the conversations. That's, I think sometimes we have shouty conversations on social media. I think we need to start having climate conversations in areas where people are so receptive to new ideas. I want to tell you one place where people are so receptive to new ideas, the in-between bit of an Irish wedding. You can broach any topic. If you are dressed up to the nines in an old Irish stately home, drinking Prosecco, eating a scone, you are at small talk pores max open. You will talk to anybody about anything. You could be talking to a fella that you knew just bulldozed a ring fort that morning, but you could say to him, did you know there's grants available for hedges? That's the, and he will be more receptive to that topic than he ordinarily would be, certainly not on Facebook. You know, so this is something that I think changing where we have the conversation doesn't mean not having them online, but it means adding new places and new spaces to have the chat is really important. I noticed that it's 5 to 1. I had a few other slides, but I won't be self-indulgent. I might leave you with that. If that's what do you think, Jack? I think people are kind of scooting off now, and there's a fine line between webinar and hostage situation. People are afraid to leave in case they're seen as being fossil fuel spies. If you do leave by now, right in the next minute, you're clearly working for the Saudi Aramco company. It's absolutely obvious.
Well,
anything else to say, Jack? Will I leave it at that?
Yeah. Well, you're clearly getting the digital equivalent of laughs. You can see them flying in the sidebar there. So honestly, refreshing, and the perspective you bring and the drama, like you say, is something that has kept us all engaged and has kept everyone here for what has been a long but extremely engaging webinar. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you before you finish, is there any place that people could see you do this full performance on stage, in person, the book, whatever it is you want to kind of speak about, please do that before we wrap up.
I mean, I don't want to sully this thing with any kind of commercial considerations, because this is a passion for me. But having said that, I'm down in Phoenix. If there's anyone in Kerry next Sunday at a thing called Wild Mind. It's in a tent near the Greenway. And if you're more urban, I'm in Dundrum on May, I think it's May the 11th, doing that show. I left out all the funny stuff, so it'll just be like way funnier in that show. So that's May the 11th, Climate Warrior. And the book is available in all good bookshops, also an audio book as well too, narrated by me, whether that's a plus or a minus for you. And the other thing I would say is the book is a snapshot. It's what I was thinking 2022, and it's a continuation. I think we're all going to be doing this for the rest of our lives, no matter what the targets are in 2030. You know, there's still a lot of planet there after 2030. And the way we're going towards our targets, Ireland is going towards the 2030 target like somebody who's got exams in May and hasn't done a tap, and it's Easter. We're hoping to have a really strong couple of bank holiday weekends in 2029. So there's going to be plenty to do after 2030. So I think we'll all be doing this for a while after then. But yes, books and shows, also that.
Thanks so much, Colm. And yeah, for anybody who wants to get any of the additional materials which Nancy, Colm and Tim will share from their respective pieces, I put in a link so that it's easier for us to send it out to you guys. It's a newsletter link, yet we haven't actually sent out any newsletters, but I guess this can be the first thing that we do, is send around all of the additional materials from this call. And there'll be lots of different ways that you can engage further with Colm, Tim and Nancy, whether it's through future climate fresks, whether it's in a tent in Kerry, or indeed through some of Tim's material online as well. So we'd like to say thanks so much to everybody, ending this meeting on a high. And yeah, despite that initial technical issue, it's been an absolute pleasure to have everybody here today. So thanks so much. And yeah, we'll see you again soon, and the recording will be shared with everybody. Thanks.